All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to explore something absolutely fascinating about our own vision. What actually happens when our two eyes don't work as a perfect team? I mean, really think about that for a second. What if the picture coming from your left eye was just different from the one coming from your right? How would your brain even begin to process that kind of conflicting information? Well, for millions of people, this isn't just some hypothetical question. It's their everyday reality. And their brain's response? It's this constant, invisible, and honestly incredible effort to stitch together a mismatched world. Let's dig into how this hidden masterpiece actually works.
So first things first, let's get to the root of the problem. We need to understand the cause, which all starts with a pretty simple physical difference between a person's two eyes.
And that condition has a name, anisometropia. Now, it sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's just a medical term for a difference in the refractive error, or what most of us just call the prescription, between your two eyes. You know, one eye might be more nearsighted or farsighted than the other. And look, we're not talking about just any tiny little difference here. For it to be clinically called anisometropia, the mismatch has to be 1 diopter or more. A diopter is just the unit that measures the power of a lens, so 1 full diopter is a pretty significant difference. Okay, so the eyes have different prescriptions. So what, right? Well, this creates a very specific and very tricky problem for the brain. I call it the image size problem.
Here's the core of it. For every single 1 diopter difference in prescription between your eyes, it directly causes a size difference in the image that each eye sends up to the brain.
And that difference is about 1.5 to 2%. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but just imagine. One eye is constantly sending a picture that is noticeably bigger or smaller than the other one.
And this brings us to our next key term, anisoconia. This is the name for the effect, the condition where the image size you actually perceive is different between your two eyes. So to keep it straight, anisometropia is the physical cause in the eyes, and anisoconia is the visual effect in the brain.
Which leads us to the most amazing part of this whole story, the brain's balancing act. How on earth does our brain manage to deal with getting 2 different sized images of the world at the exact same time? Well, it turns out our brains have a built-in tolerance for this kind of thing. It's pretty incredible, actually. Most brains can fuse or merge images that have up to a 3% size difference. If you're below that threshold, you'd probably never even know you had a problem. But what happens when you go past that 3% limit? Well, that's when the brain starts to struggle. And that struggle shows up as real physical symptoms, headaches, constant eye strain, and even double vision. But get this, that 3% number is really just an average. Everybody's brain is wired differently, thanks to something called neuroplasticity, the brain's amazing ability to adapt. Some people can barely tolerate a difference of 0.75%, while others can handle a whopping 7% difference with no issues at all. It's a huge, totally individual range. So let's talk about the long-term consequences. What happens when the brain can't cope? Either because the image difference is just too big, or because that amazing adaptation just doesn't happen the right way. This is where timing is absolutely everything. If this happens in early childhood, when the brain's vision center is still developing, it might just take a drastic step. It will literally suppress or just ignore the image from one eye to avoid the confusion, and that can lead to amblyopia, what most of us know as a lazy eye. But if the condition shows up later in life, the brain's wiring is already locked in. It can't just switch an eye off, so the person is stuck with those frustrating symptoms like headaches and double vision. And the specific type of prescription mismatch matters too. If it's a hypermetropic or farsighted mismatch, it very often leads to an inward turn of the eye and again, amblyopia. But if the mismatch is myopic or nearsighted, the person might not have any visible eye turn at all, which can make the condition a lot harder to catch without a proper exam. And here's the crucial takeaway, the point I really want you to get. Anisometropia is the single most common cause of amblyopia. We're talking about it being responsible for a massive chunk, between 24 and 37% of all cases. This isn't some rare thing, it's a primary driver of a really serious vision development issue in kids. Okay, let's wrap this all up. What's the big takeaway here? What have we learned about this secret partnership, this intricate dance happening between our eyes and our brain? It's really a clear 4-step story. First, you start with physically different eyes. That's anisometropia. Second, this leads to different sized images being sent to the brain. That's anisoconia. Third, the brain has to respond. It either adapts or it struggles. And fourth, the person's vision is impacted, for better or for worse. It's a direct chain of events.
And that really leaves us with this final, kind of mind-bending thought. How much of what you think you see right now is actually the result of your brain's invisible, tireless work? Your perception of a single, stable world isn't a given. It's a constant, incredible act of neurological magic. It really makes you wonder, what other hidden masterpieces is your brain performing right now that you don't even know about?